So this is going to be a response to a fairly regular question that I get asked. Some of my longtime subscribers might be interested to know that in the last year, I'd say, my channel's basically increased in volume by about 50%, and this has been driven almost entirely by interest in foreskin restoration and circumcision, but especially foreskin restoration. Several of the videos that I've uploaded on that topic have been perennial, well, not perennial, in the last year or two have just been real popular. People watch them every day, and people commented on them every day. And people not just make comments, but they make really heartfelt, detailed comments on a fairly regular basis. And so I think it's definitely a topic worth making videos about, but also just answering these questions. So this question, a lot of people become aware of this process, and it's fascinating that foreskin restoration is um, a physical process. Technically in the United States, it's not called a medical procedure for legal reasons, but it kind of is. Um, has been around for thousands of years. Like we have evidence of this being done, um, at least in the first century of the Common Era, if not in before the Common Era, and historical records talking about it. And I'm pretty sure Josephus talks about it even. And yet it's it's not very widely known um, among contemporary society. So it's got this long historical history, and then uh, the vast majority of people today are completely oblivious of it. And when people do learn about it, obviously there's a big sections of the population where it's irrelevant, right? If you're a female or if you're uncircumcised, then it's just a topic that you might find interesting in some hypothetical or theoretical sense, but not something you're going to take personally. But if you are circumcised, there's actually a pretty good chance that you would find the whole idea very interesting to one way or another. That's not to say that you will necessarily find it interesting in a way that makes you want to do it, but just that it's an option, that it's possible. And a lot of people then go through this process of they don't know how to do it. They have a lot of questions about how does it work, how effective is it, and they can kind of be boiled down and summed up into the general question: should they do it, or should I restore my foreskin? So I have to start off by saying that every single person is different, and I wouldn't dream of telling people, well, you should do it, if I don't know the specifics of your circumstance, right? You may be in a situation in your life, or your psychological profile might be such that foreskin restoration is not for you, or not something that you should really think about. Um, but I think I can outline some of the general considerations that people go through. So um, I think there are two major reasons to do it, and the first one of those reasons is not going to be apply to a lot of people, but there are some people who are so damaged by circumcision psychologically and by the realization that they were mutilated, that restoration is psychologically one of the only things they can do to heal. So I have a friend who is circumcised and you know, was is very upset about it, to the point that when he looks at his dick, he feels really damaged. He gets angry, he gets sad, he's got a lot of problems. And every time he goes pee, every time he gets in a, every time he masturbates, every time. Um, it would be very helpful for him if when he looked down at his genitals, he saw something that looked like an uncircumcised or an intact penis. Regardless of any functional benefits it gave him, that would be beneficial to him. And not only that, restoration is one of the only things that you really can do. You can't become uncircumcised. You can't go back in time. You can't undo it, which is a thought that a lot of guys have. And but you can restore whatever difficulties there are in that, and I will go into some of those. So there are people who have that psychological profile where I just feel like, hey, that's not going to go away. The feeling that you have of inadequacy or of emasculation or mutilation or loss, that feeling is not going to go away. But the process of restoration can definitely help. That doesn't mean it necessarily will always help or that it will do the same for everyone, but it's certainly something that you can do. Now, I don't think that there are that many men, circumcised men, who have those feelings explicitly. I think that circumcision on infants is very damaging, and I think it does have long-term psychological effects on people. I think that's just very, very likely from what we know about early childhood trauma and how circumcisions, what areas they affect and whatnot. But there hasn't been a ton of research, and even admitting that people have um, that it affects people doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to affect them all the same way. And so certainly most circumcised men don't have those feelings. However, most circumcised men have never really thought about it and are to a large extent blissfully ignorant, right? If you have no idea that there is such a thing as restoration, if you have no concept of the value of foreskin, right? If it's something that you don't know anything about or you only know the mass media cultural view of foreskin, which is that it's worthless and that it's dirty and that it's just in the way and that having it removed is a benefit, then you're probably not going to have a lot of angst or emotional problems associated with your circumcision. It might manifest in other ways, but not explicit fall extent. But the, the information that can give you the epiphany that you have actually lost something is now out there. It's on the internet, it's on YouTube. Uh, it's a spreading, it's a growing. Um, I don't want to say movement, but cultural awareness. And once you have become triggered to believe that, once you have started down that path of realizing that you were damaged and seeing yourself as damaged, that genie cannot go back in the bottle, right? You can't you can't become ignorant again. You can't forget about it, unless you get Alzheimer's or whatever. And so you're left in this situation where you are psychologically bothered by what happened to you, and yet you feel very helpless to do anything about it. And restoration is one of the few things you can do about it. So I think if you're a man who is in that position, and there's a lot of guys too who they learn about restoration, they learn about foreskin. They agree, they become persuaded that circumcision on infants is wrong and that it's probably damaging. But then they say, look, I've already lived 30 years, 40 years, whatever it is, and I'm getting by. So yes, I don't agree that it was wrong that this was done to me, but I don't really want to, at this point in my life, put in the effort to change things. Uh, perfectly, it's a perfectly understandable sentiment to have. However, the awareness of the epiphany that you've had is not going to go away. And so very often you'll have people who are aware of foreskin restoration and they don't do anything, and then 5 years later, 10 years later, it's still naked on. This certainly happened to me. I learned about foreskin restoration in about 2012. I started in 2013. I gave up and I was just like, look, I'm busy with my life. I have other things that I need to focus on. I don't need to have to worry about this. And yet the knowledge never went away. And when I got reminders, and in my case, kind of very specific instance of showering with a hockey team at my gym, most of whom were intact, uh, that just really hit home. And so sometimes people will put it off and say, well, I feel fine, but you're never going to unknow what you know. And there's a good chance, it's not necessarily going to happen to everyone, but there's a good chance that's going to bother you. And this is one of the few things you can do about it. So there's that reason. But I don't think that's the majority of cut men, certainly. The other reason is just for increased sexual function, sexual ability, and sexual pleasure. So one of the hangups that a lot of men have is that they say, look, you can do this, but you're not going to be like you would be if you were intact, if you were uncut. And so therefore, what's the point? Well, fair enough. And the fact that you won't become like you were intact or uncut is something that a lot of guys, even those who restore, struggle with. However, that does not mean that you can't have an increase in sexual function and sexual ability. And uh, how much are we talking about? Well, people vary, right? And it's difficult to quantify these. It's easier to qualify them, but it's difficult to quantify the changes you see. But I'll say that in my personal case, uh, there were radical changes in sensation and sexual function, some of which happened fairly early. If you're talking about the sensitivity of the glands, if you start covering your glands consistently, uh, which you can do before you're restored, it sometimes only takes 2 or 3 weeks for there to be really notable increases in sensitivity. And in general, those increases in sensitivity are positives when it comes to sexual experience. Certainly was positive for performing, being the penetrative partner in penetrative sex and in oral sex in my case. The other thing is, and Ron Lowe, the creator of the TLC Tugger, has kind of talked about this. Yes, the sensation is great, especially for men who are getting older and who are having more problems with lack of sensitivity. But what's very comparably, if not more important, is just having the additional skin. Having the additional skin and having skin mobility and having the ability to envelop and unenvelop the head repeatedly, uh, that's a functional change. That's actually a physical alteration to the mechanics of sex and masturbation, and a very, very pleasurable one. Um, this is one, people sometimes wonder, is there a difference between cut and uncut? When uncut men masturbate, typically the way they do it in one way or another is by pulling the skin on and off the head. Some men have more foreskin and they don't pull it all the way off, and some people will grab it from the tip and pull it forwards. Most people will pull it down. And cut men do not have sufficient skin almost ever. There's rare examples of men who are circumcised so minimally that they can, but that's unusual. Um, Tend to not do this at all. And so it's very interesting when people have debates and they say there's no difference or there's only a trivial difference, when the basic way men A, masturbate, and B, perform penetrative sex acts, whether they be male or female, is just different. And the original version, the natural version, the skin mobility, love motion version is functionally superior in my experience. And it just makes logical sense that it would be. The idea that the cultural custom of circumcision improves the function, this is a custom that really is to be found in the Bronze Age. And the cultures that proliferated it did not claim. In retrospect, people attribute them. People say, "Oh, the Abraham and the Jews were great at medicine. They discovered this prophylactic miracle called circumcision." And the Bible never claims that it is that, and that is the reason you do it. Or they'll say, "Oh, it's better for sex. It enhances sexual pleasure experience." Again, from what we know, it's certainly never claimed in the Bible. It was certainly not claimed by the people who popularized circumcision in the 19th century, who actually lauded it as reducing the sexual pleasure and sexual function of males, and that was itself good. So circumcision was good for that reason. So it really kind of strains credulity to believe that having a closer approximate to the original isn't better. And this is something that would be true regardless of your psychological feelings about circumcision. So you might not really be beating yourself up about um, loss or feeling emasculated. You might psychologically feel just perfectly fine, but that doesn't mean that you wouldn't benefit from having better sexual experiences, which I think are very probable. I don't know of any uh, restorers who don't say this. Now, I understand fully that there is a problem in that you have selection bias going on. This is a similar problem when men who decide to get circumcised in adulthood and then say that they feel fine. There's selection bias there. Maybe it's only the men with the least pleasurable foreskins who decide to get circumcised, or men who have psychological reasons or cultural reasons to want to be circumcised, and this is going to color their reportage of how they feel after. And so if they say, "Oh, I feel fine after," um, one can quite reasonably say, "Hey, this is a person who's wanted this maybe for years. who believes that it's culturally necessary or religiously mandated or whatever, their testimony, even if they are trying to be sincere, is tainted by their bias. And that is also true, it literally of every man who restores. And so I am very sensitive to that. And there's also beyond that just the effects of placebo. If you do something, you can believe that it's beneficial, and then that can become the benefit. Now, that's not such a bad thing if you think about it, if you're actually getting the benefit. However, uh, to use myself as an example, um, I wonder how far the placebo effect could go. My sexual function increased in a way that I find difficult to imagine would be possible just from placebo. In my case, I had an inability to orgasm from penetrative sex. I had an inability to orgasm from oral sex. I had an inability to orgasm from traditional masturbation. And when I say inability, I mean literally never happened. Literally never happened. I started restoring, and I started restoring in April, and within May, I had my first traditional jerk off orgasm, and within 6 months, I had my first orgasm from oral sex, and within 9 months, I had my first orgasm from penetrative sex. Uh, Coupled with the fact that there were physical differences, right? That there was more skin and that the glands was becoming more sensitive. I think that it's very reasonable to assume that there were actual physical functional increases in sexual pleasure and function, and that it wasn't all just placebo. And uh, that's something that can be echoed with pretty much every man who restores. If you restore and your gland is now covered from skin, and you have mobility and you did not before, then it's not just a psychological placebo effect. There is a physical difference in your body that it can actually be measured in terms of how much skin there is. It probably could be measured in terms of sensitivity testing of the glands anyway, and potentially of the inner foreskin, although I'm not sure on that issue. But um, and then just the function, how does it work? It's like taking the shocks in and out of a car. Car still runs, but it's not the same as if it has its shock absorbers in there. So even if you're not psychologically beaten up about circumcision or it doesn't really bother you, you stand to benefit physically. Now, that all sounds like a pitch, and it kind of is, but that's only the pro side of it. There's the con side. The con side is the time, the frustration, the commitment. Now, foreskin restoration is not expensive. There are ways you can do it surgically, but those ways are expensive and risky, and also just vastly inferior. So that is not the option that most men go on. Too few people are having this done for the surgeries to be very good at this point. Just the fact is that the demand for restored foreskins is too low for there to be a big market of surgeons who are skilled. The people who do it, but the consensus is that they're just inferior to doing it the old-fashioned way, so to speak, the gradual way. So the gradual way is cheap. Most of the devices that you could buy are not particularly expensive, 70 to 100 to $150, maybe $200 at the top at the high end. If you say use T-tape, that's a method where you use tape every day, and the tape is not free, but you might be looking at a $5 to $10 a month tape bill, maybe less, potentially a lot less, and for however long it takes. Like I said, most devices that are $80, $90. I'd be hard pressed. I've bought a couple different devices, some of which I've used regularly and some that I haven't, but you don't need to have multiple different devices. There are ways to do it manually. There's a lot of guys who use manual methods that are essentially free, other than the time you put in. It's not a ton of effort usually, unless you're doing manual methods. Most of the devices are passive. You have to take the time to put them on, and you have to take the time to take them off. And in the interim, you're just wearing them. And most of the devices I've used have been ones that I could wear, when I was working, when I was at home, when I was out and about in town, when I was walking, even going to the gym, even stretching. It depends on the device that you use. I would be hard pressed to give a super accurate estimates, but For most of these devices, you're looking at 1 minute or 2 minutes to take them on and 1 minute or 2 minutes to take them off. So if you take them on and on twice a day or 3 times a day, you're looking at 10 minutes, 20 to 15 minutes, maybe a day. That's not a huge time commitment, but it is something that takes time. And the main problem, the main cost is a psychological one in the sense that because humans are evolved to be hunter-gatherers, and hunter-gatherers typically get rewarded for their efforts like within the day. Um, we kind of have a blind spot where delayed gratification, we're working hard to see results down the road is difficult. We want to have results right away, and this is obvious to anyone who's ever tried to get into shape or looks at the people who struggle to get into shape. Everyone wants that beach body or whatever their end goal is, and they join a gym and they go, and after a day or two they're frustrated because no one is going to achieve their goals in a day or two. And well, if you're just consistent and you go every day, you will eventually get there. Uh, Psychologically, we're not set up to be rewarded for that. And foreskin restoration is very, very similar to just getting in shape in terms of that it's a habit that you need to do every day, or at least on a regular basis, if not literally every single day. And that it takes, I mean, it depends what your fitness goals are, but a comparable time or more to fitness goals. So if you're starting and when you're really overweight and you want to have like a great beach body, you know, that could easily take over a year, maybe 2 years, depending on again where you're starting, where your end goal is. Foreskin restoration is almost certainly going to take longer than that for most people. It's rare to find reports of people doing it in a year, although I've certainly heard of it. You're looking at more like 4 years or more. Now, it's also maybe less effort. Like putting on the device for 15 minutes a day is less effort than going to the gym for an hour or 2 hours. Never mind the time you spend traveling to and from the gym. And it's certainly a lot cheaper. All right, I'll spend 1 month of gym membership is going to cover most of my restoration costs. 2 or 3 months at the gym is going to cover all of my restoration costs through history. So but it is frustrating, right? Many people start the journey. They get in, they get motivated to do it, and they start doing it. And when you don't see that coverage, when you don't see the skin covering your glands yet, that's very, very frustrating. And you learn a lot of stuff about your penis in the process of doing this. And one of the things you learn also is that it varies in size and skin coverage all the time. Over the course of the day, when you're mildly aroused, when you're super warm, when you're just out of bed, when you're active, when you're unactive, blah, 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 a huge number of variables. And you kind of get into this stage where sometimes you might look and you might see, oh, I look like I have a lot of coverage. And that's encouraging. And then you go and you take a hot shower and your dick becomes 20% larger, and all the gains appear to be gone. And as much as you can logically tell yourself, well, obviously, because the penis got longer and it's not, I didn't actually lose gains, it just appears that way. It still viscerally is frustrating to your motivation level. So there's a lot of people who start to restore and will stop after a few months or even just a few weeks, and then just stop. And if you fall out of the habit, it can be very difficult to get back into the habit. Speaking from personal experience here. So that's a frustrating thing, and that's a cost. And I can understand somebody looking at the outset and saying, I really don't want to have to deal with all that. Now, again, most of the restoration techniques that you can do are pretty non-invasive. There's a few that are more involved and that would be difficult to incorporate into a normal day, but then there are people who have lifestyles that accommodate that. But if you use a DTR or a TLC tugger or some kind of homemade knee brace device, or a weight, or these are things that you put them on and they stay on as long as you leave them on, and they're pretty comfortable. You need something that is pretty comfortable. If you have a technique that's not comfortable, you're not going to be able to stick with it. And you go about your day, and you just day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out, month after month after month, year after year. Presumably you make progress. And once you're done, you're done. And this is something a lot of people have asked, like once you do it, do you have to keep doing it forever? No. There's a lot of evidence that you might have to overshoot your goal. So let's say that whenever you finish, there's a little bit of settling that happens. So let's say you gain enough skin to fully cover your glands when you're flaccid or soft. So you stop, and over the next 6 months, it retracts slightly, 10%. Uh, so you might need to continue again and get so you have 10% more than you want to end with, and then call it quits. But you still have made a lot of progress to even get to that point. And that's, I think, I don't know, I don't have numbers on this, but it's pretty common to see men who have started but really have not made a lot of progress, and they become dejected and they kind of give up. Once you see guys who get to like C4, C5, and for those who are curious, there are ways to measure coverage. The most common one is called the coverage index. So you see the coverage index will be indicated by a letter C, and then a number. And so like a C1 is the most cut. It means the least amount of skin. It means that you have no skin mobility even when you are flaccid. Even when you are fully soft, you have no skin mobility at all. When you get hard, the skin is going to be quite tight. A C1 could be painful. And unfortunately, the standard American circumcision is aiming at a C1. A C10 means that you have full erect coverage. Even when you are fully hard, your head is fully covered. Now, that's the standard older index that people use. And so sometimes you'll see people, am I a C1, am I a C2, am I a C3, 4? I'm a C5, by the way, just for anyone curious at this point. And there's another difference. There are certain problems with the coverage index. Basically, it doesn't deal with the mobility of the skin and the variability, because what tends to happen is you don't end up having a certain amount of coverage 24 hours a day. You have a shifting amount of coverage as your penis shifts in size. And so you deal with a situation, what percentage of the time do you have rollover or partial coverage? So there's another index called the real coverage index. I usually see it with an R or an RC, and I don't remember if that goes to R1 to R to 10. I think it's fairly similar to the coverage index, but it goes into more details about the degree. It's a better index overall in terms of description of restoration. The coverage index actually works really well for guys who are intact, who just have a natural foreskin. It doesn't work as well for the intermediate stages. And that's another thing I want to address, because a lot of people have asked me about that. Won't I look weird in the intermediate stages? And the answer is, to most people, the answer is no. Culturally, and not just in the United States, around the world, a dick is either cut or uncut. And but those are not actually binary things, in the sense that, like, not all cut dicks have the same amount of skin. Some are cut extremely tight, and some are cut so minimally that they actually look fully uncut. And I have a friend who's like that. His doctor, when he was born, just believed in being minimal, and he did the old uh, uh, bit pariah, the original Jewish type of foreskin, where they just took the acroposkia, just the overhang over the skin, over the glands, leaving him fully covered. But yet he is circumcised. That's rare, but it happens. On the other hand, you have uncut guys some uncut guys have so much skin that even when they're fully hard, they have overhang. They have extra skin, extra skin. It's not actually extra skin, but they have additional skin that goes past the head even when they're hard. Most men don't have that much. Most men, when they're hard, their head is either fully exposed or at least like half exposed. And the result of this is that there is an overlap, right? Men with very loose circumcisions can have more foreskin than uncut men who would just have naturally short foreskins. And I've seen that as well. I've met uncut guys who just have, even when they're soft, almost no coverage at all. And so, yes, there's these stages where you won't be fully covered, where you'll be partially covered. But partially covered in most people's mind is going to be uncut. People are going to see that and think you're uncircumcised. That's what happens to me. Last summer, especially, many of the men that I met, uh, without me giving any kind of prompting or describing what I was doing or anything along those lines, would say stuff like, "Oh, I love uncut dicks," you know. "Oh, you're uncut, great," you know, stuff like that. So they did not see it and go, "Okay, that's a little weird. Like, what is that?" In their minds, that would just make it uncut. And there's just kind of this threshold, and it's different for it's in the eye of the beholder, right? So there are some men who are going to see you and think that you're cut, and others who are going to see you and think that you're uncut. And as you progress, the ratio of men who perceive you as uncut is going to increase until you get to the point, a fully restored man who has full coverage, his scar is not going to be visible. He's going to look, and this is one thing I will say, whatever deficiencies there are in terms of sensation and function of a restored man versus an uncut man, aesthetically, they can end up looking indistinguishable. Um, like I can't distinguish them, and I have an eye for this stuff. So, um, you will get to a point. A way to measure that would be what percentage of the public, what percentage of the guys in the locker room think that you're uncut. And I'm already at the point where the majority think that I'm uncut if they don't already know. I have yet to have someone at the gym who has seen me go through the process approach me and say, "Hey, I remember 3, 4 years ago you were circumcised and now you're not. What's the deal?" That conversation has not yet happened. I'd be very curious to see if it was. My guess is that nobody's going to be willing to speculate and to have the chutzpah to come up and actually say that. But I would be interested if it ever does. But when you see new people who don't know your history, then you get their unfiltered responses, and you can say, at some point, if you've not started, if you're just fully circumcised, yeah, almost everyone's going to think that you are circumcised, and the only ones who don't are people who are wildly misinformed or bad judges of that. And that is a thing too. There's a lot of men who are so misinformed about foreskins, penises, and circumcision that they misidentify themselves. But as you progress, it's not going to look weird. You're just going to look like you're at different ends of the bell curves in terms of foreskin, and people are just going to classify you in one group or the other. So that's not actually, I understand why people would be concerned about that. It's not actually a big problem. The bigger problem is just the torment that you find psychologically to see your progress appearing to go like this, because the coverage apparently goes like this for a long time. You get to a point where you're going to be consistently covered and it's going to be fine. But until you get to that point, you have to deal with sometimes looking completely uncut and other times looking completely cut. And, and it depends on how much your penis varies in size and whatnot. But so that's a cost. Like that's psychologically very frustrating at the very least. So, I can't blanket say it's for everybody, because it's not for everybody. If you really are happy the way you are, and you really don't want to go to the effort, then don't do it. If it's really bothering you, if it's something that you have psychological problems about, I think that it makes sense for you to, this is the one thing that you can do, then it makes sense to do it. If you are interested in increasing sexual pleasure or sexual function, even if you feel fine, then this is something that you can do, and it's relatively low cost, right? So the money cost is low. It's just something that if you just work it into your daily routine and make it habitual, you will progress in it. And some people progress faster than others, so it's very hard at the outset to kind of predict how much there's going to be. And there's all kinds of debates. Should you do high tension for short periods of time or low tension for long periods of time? This is something that we can argue, and unfortunately, there is no clear empirical data. There is only anecdotal data. And I've even seen some of the forums I've been in, they try and do empirical data as best as they can as amateurs and just have 50 different guys try a certain method for whatever, 6 months, and assuming that they all report well, kind of going off of that. But that's the best that we kind of have. So it's definitely worth thinking about. It's definitely worth considering. The end result is going to be an improvement. And so the fact that very likely to be an improvement, it's going to be an improvement aesthetically. It's going to look different. It's going to be physically different in the sense that you have more skin. And I think that is um, a fair basis to assume that it's highly likely that there will be some functional increase and some sensory increase. How much? It's very difficult to say. Again, I've did an interview with a guy who got circumcised as an adult and then restored, and he gave a uncut is like a 10 in pleasure, cut is like a 2, restored is like a 7 or an 8. And I've heard very similar assessments along those lines, and that's kind of the best that we have to go on based on my own personal experience. I feel like that's completely plausible. But results may vary, and how much increase you're going to get could vary. I don't think it matters too much that you are not necessarily going to be like you would be if you were intact, and you're not going to be like you would be intact. Restoration does not restore the ring band, the very sensitive pucker or elastic tip of the foreskin. That's gone. You won't get a single new nerve or a single new Meissner's corpuscle from restoration. So at least I don't think so. So you won't be like you would be if you were intact. You will just be better. And the thing is, if unless you were circumcised as an adult, you won't have that to be a comparison. So like, the man I interviewed, the ones who get circumcised as an adult, they have the 10 to go off of, and so that's where they get the 7. If you started at a 2 and you just got 4 times better, you wouldn't call it a 7. That would be a 10 as far as you were concerned. That would be the most pleasure that you ever felt. And I know for me, I mean, I remember very clearly the first orgasm I had uh, when I had enough skin to use it as a masturbation tool. It was the best orgasm I'd ever had in my life up to that point, which should not happen to somebody I think I was 32 at the time. So, uh, was that a 10% increase or a 50% increase? I don't know. I don't know if I can quantify. I just know that it was a lot better. And when I've read accounts of other restored men, they'll claim this. And again, there's a bias there that can't be eliminated. But when they go into descriptions, uh, it it's an indicative of experiencing new sensations that it's very difficult to cross the sensory border with words, with vocabulary, but it's not impossible. You can sometimes tell, hey, there's something there. Can't always, and it's not perfect. So, and I will admit that. Um, but it's consistent enough that I think and because of the physical changes, I think it's very likely that honestly they're onto something, that there is actually a sensory increase. So given that the cost, we're talking about either no cost, 0 to let's say $200, maybe less, total cost financially. That's not very high. The investment of time, 10, 15 minutes a day, an hour a week, something like that, is probably going to be sufficient. You might spend more time early on when you're trying to figure out, the first time you try and put on, say, a DTR or a TLC tugger, it's difficult. There's a certain technique to it, and it might take you a couple tries, and it seem frustrating. But once you've done it a few times, you'll become proficient, and the amount of time that you need will decrease. I can put my devices on and off at the gym, in the locker room while changing, and do it quickly and discreetly, that even when there's other people around, they're very unlikely to notice. That's without even going to the trouble of finding a stall or going to a corner that's isolated. So it's very, very practical and very low in terms of time, right? So you might wear it for 8 hours, but that doesn't mean that for 8 hours you're engaged. You could go out and I'm wearing it right now and making YouTube videos, right? I could wear it to the gym. I could wear it to work. I would be working on an oil rig, and I would have my device on, all day, no problem. And it would never inhibit me from doing anything physical or doing anything, um, more mental or whatever. So um, I think the costs are more in terms of frustration and psychological, just the time commitment, which was very daunting. But here's the other thing: unless you're planning to die in the next couple of years, your expectation is to survive that time period and be alive at the end of it. And so why not? So that's my that's my I was trying to stop before I sneezed and I just could not get it done. So I'm sorry for that, but it's not going to get edited out. So I probably will do another video before too long, going into each of the various methods into more detail. In general, there are people who have succeeded and failed with each of them, and everyone has one that works the best for them. And so basically you have to try several different. You try one. If the first one you try seems to work and seems comfortable and seems like you can work it into your life, fine, run with it. But the chances are you're going to have to try a couple different methods. I've tried a couple different methods, and there's several that I've used for months on end. It's just kind of a process that you have to go through, and it's not a necessarily difficult process. It's just a fairly time-consuming one, and sometimes it's a frustrating one because you don't necessarily know, is this the right one? Is this one really working? And that's something that only time will tell. But anyway, I will talk to you all later. Bye-bye.